There is no such thing as a day without space.
That's the mantra of General John Hyten, the head of Air Force Space Command.
Think of what life used to be like and all the things that we have today in warfare that wouldn't exist without space. Remotely piloted aircraft, all-weather precision-guided munitions didn't exist before space. Now we can attack any target on the planet, anytime, anywhere, in any weather.
What would the U.S. military do without space?
What happens is you go back to World War II. You go back to industrial age warfare.
And your job is to make sure there is no day without space.
Absolutely.
The U.S. has more satellites in space than any other nation, over 500 and counting. More than 30 military and civilian launches will take place this year at Space Command bases in Florida and California. The Pentagon told us it spends $10 billion a year on space, but we found a White House report that estimates the real cost is much higher, $25 billion when you count spy satellites and other classified spending. That's more than NASA or any other space agency in the world. Some of those satellites provide the GPS signals that guide smart bombs now attacking ISIS targets in Iraq and Syria. But a lot of people don't realize those same GPS satellites provide the signals your smartphone uses to navigate. It's a service the Air Force provides free, not just here in the United States, but to the entire world.
This is a global utility, and there's a lot of people depending on this, and we understand that.
At a Boeing plant in Los Angeles, Colonel Bill Cooley showed us a GPS satellite that was being tested in a special chamber to make sure it was ready for launch.
When these things get on orbit, there's no depot. You can't drive it back into the maintenance shop. It's somewhat like trying to design an automobile that is going to run for 12 to 15 years, and you can't take it in the shop, you can't take it in for refueling, but it's got to run 24/7.
In orbit, the satellite will spread out its solar panels, point its odd-looking antennas toward the Earth, and broadcast its location along with a time signal accurate to nanoseconds. A GPS receiver needs signals from 4 of these satellites to figure out its location. Colonel Cooley told us it costs $250 million to design and build each one.
And to put it into space, how much does it cost?
Yeah, that's about the same.
So you're pushing $500 million to get that thing into space.
That's right.
The U.S. has 31 active GPS satellites in space right now, and a lot more than smart bombs and smartphones depend on them. Bank ATMs, cell phone towers, and power grids use their signals. Farmers use GPS to work their fields.
So, focus a bit on Afghanistan, Iraq. What does space bring to it? Think about GPS. Think about what GPS does to every one of us. It's pretty straightforward for most of us. We've lived it, breathed it. Many of you have built it and generated it, but precision engagement is what GPS brings to the world. Whether it's MRLS, whether it's a JDAM, whether it's a young soldier on the ground, whether it is an aviator who may have been downed and needs to use a personal radio to contact a SAR force to come in, whether it's a JTAC who is generating coordinates and then generating those coordinates to an airplane overhead to put weapons on target. Precision's the name of the game. We say, our air forces can be to the foot and to the second. Quite frankly, all of our military forces can be to the foot and to the second. And the only way you do that is through the integration of space into the daily business. We all take it for granted. Space does tremendous work for ISR. Think about how you take overheads to platforms into a combined air operations center that integrates, or into a maritime control center. Can be a strike force on land, can be a strike force on the water, and then it integrates it straight into an operation. Obviously, we don't talk a lot about operations and how they're integrated, but we all know that if you don't have space on your side, it's going to be a bad day for the blue side. Shift a bit to the Pacific. When I left the Middle East, I went from one sandbox to another. And in the Pacific, you look at just the sheer immense size of the AOR, 52% of the Earth's surface, and you look at how do you do that without space? whether it's space weather. The biggest threat in the Pacific on a day-to-day environment is Mother Nature. So if you look at how do you tell what's going on and how do you predict it, there's a humanitarian disaster in the Pacific that requires a response from forces once every 8 weeks. So how do you tie that into it? Well, you first go to space because the AOR is so large. So whether it's weather, whether it's satellite pictures, whatever it is, you're going into areas that don't have a lot of coverage. And so it's very, very critical that your DIR Space Force side by side with you, you understand what it brings to the fight. We talked a bit about missile warning. You know, time and distance has a quality all of its own, and warning and indications is critical, whether it's looking at what someone is preparing to do or what someone has actually done and now there's something in the air coming at you. And so that indication and warning, whether it's sitting on the Korean Peninsula where time of flight for a Scud to force us south of the 38th parallel is measured in minutes, in seconds, or whether it's a missile shot that may be coming from somewhere and it's measured in multiple minutes. It gives senior leadership the opportunity to think about what and how we are going to respond. So all of our AORs are reliant on space. All the things that it brings, and how would you operate, if you will, and many of you have done read on the Day Without Space event. I will tell you it's absolutely critical to have that integration from a warfighting perspective in what we do.